want to know what a combat-proven Special Forces sniper and UFC athlete can teach us about closing B2B deals, then this episode is for you. Hello, Sales Nation, and welcome to today's episode of the Salesman Podcast. On today's show, we have the legend that is Tim Kennedy. He is a Special Forces sniper. He is a recently retired UFC athlete. He is the host over at the Sheepdog Project podcast. You can find out more about Tim over at timkennedymma.com. And on today's show, we're diving into fear. We're diving into motivation. We're diving into Tim and his high-end, high levels of all of this and how it relates to us in complex B2B sales. And so, with all that said, let's jump in to today's episode. Tim, welcome to the Salesman Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
You're more than welcome, sir. Excited to have you on. Excited to get some context and hopefully give the audience a bit of kick in the ass today as they listen to the show on the way to the office, on the way to see a customer. And I want to start off with fear. So this means different things to different people. But in my emails, back and forth with the audience, and I've been in this place as well, so I'm not kind of holding myself higher or differently to the audience here. The topic of fear gets brought up in making cold calls, in going into what they quote as quote unquote big business deals where perhaps they see themselves as slightly lower value in the conversation. They see the CEO, the C-suite, the people that dealing with the decision makers as high value. Fear is brought up in this realm. Now, is that okay? Is that how humans are wired? Is that what we should be fearful of? Or, with your background, the UFC, the military, everything else, are we just being pussies in those scenarios? Is that not the place for fear?
Fear is a wonderful thing. Fear is an enabling thing, and fear is an empowering thing. What the problem with fear is when it starts changing how you're going to behave, when it starts debilitating you. The coolest thing about courage is everybody gets scared. The private in World War I to the Navy SEAL guy at, Mogadishu. Every one of those guys had the exact same fear. It's just what they decided and chose to do about it. Fear creates some really wonderful hormones and pheromones in our body. Those things make us very acutely aware and make us hone in and be very focused on what we're trying to do. Adrenaline is a hell of a drug. One of the greatest things about fear is you have to embrace it. I know when I get shot at, I'm going to be scared that I'm going to die. I know that when I got blown up on countless times, I thought I was going to die. When you get out of a helicopter and you see muzzle flashes and you hear bullets snapping past your head, that's scary. But it also made you focus. When I'm walking out to the UFC octagon cage and people are screaming your name and you hear your song that you've walked out to before playing loud over the speaker, you're scared. You're about to walk out there and some dude's going to try to punch you in the face, knock you out, or choke you unconscious. But it gives you a focus. And if you embrace that, it gives you a clarity and it gives you a level of preparedness that you couldn't get elsewhere. So one, you need to embrace it. You need to recognize it, but most importantly, you have to overcome it.
Is this a choice, Tim? Is this a binary of I in this moment or you in this moment as you're walking out into that cage, you choose to embrace it? Or is this habit, discipline, training, decades of experience?
So your ability to overcome that fear and then channel it and use it so that you're focused and you can do what you've prepared for, it's about the preparation. It's about training. So if you're going to be walking into, I own 6 different businesses. And if I'm walking in to try to establish a new partnership with another supplier or another fulfillment company or a new vendor, I've done all of my research. Like I know everything about everybody. I know the numbers. I've made sure that I know what the best position is for us. I know what the worst position is for us. I know what I'm going to walk out with. And I know what I would never walk out with. So when I walk into that room, I'm completely prepared for what's going to happen. Just like when I'm walking into the battlefield, I've loaded every single round into the magazine. I've checked my grenades. I've looked at my flashbangs. I've been training for 15 years now to go and do these missions. And just like walking into the octagon, how much time did I spend in my fight camp? How many sparring rounds did I do? What is my strength and conditioning? What is my weight? All of those tiny little decisions, and there's millions of them. There's infinite, but all of them have led up to me being prepared to do my job. And if your job is to sell stuff, you better be prepared to do it.
So because I'm super intrigued here, this is crazy interesting for me because you've got the comparison, clearly the number of businesses, clearly you're somewhat of a salesperson at heart if you're running these companies and doing everything else as well. So if a 10 is you're running, walking, whatever's happening, and you can hear ding, ding, ding of bullet fire hitting near you, or you can hear the cracking of bricks and cement as bullet hits it. If that's a 10, what is going into an important, not just any kind of business meeting, but an important one that's financially going to have an impact on your life? Where does that rank on? Maybe we're not talking about fear here. Maybe we are talking about excitement. We can rephrase, we can perhaps change that word into something else. But if 10 is bullets shooting past your ear, what is the feeling or the experience or the adrenaline rush you're getting from going into a life-changing business meeting?
I mean, for me, it's a 5. But it depends on the format. If I'm walking into the Chrysler building in New York on Manhattan, and knowing I'm going to walk into a boardroom and that there's 10 suits sitting there, and all of them are going to have specific questions for me, and I've had that, or walking into a room to do kind of a public speaking event, and my performance there is going to dictate maybe if the publisher is going to sign to pick up my book. And that's going to change, what I'm going to make in a year from $1 million to $10 million. We're talking a massive difference in something. So people have different fears, and they're going to respond to that boardroom or that public speaking opportunity or just that cold call differently. I've been shot at more than I've walked into a boardroom, which is a really scary, sad thing to say out loud, but totally true. Which also means that a boardroom is a little less. I'm less comfortable in there. I'd rather be wearing body armor and holding a gun. With that, it brings a set of fears or anxiety or anxiousness or excitement that I don't regularly get in other areas of my life. So I have to prepare even more to make sure I'm totally ready for every single question or every single comment or bit of conversation that could come up.
Perfect. I wanted to get that number to give the audience context of, because I say this all the time, and with you, this is the perfect example, because I say you shouldn't be nervous of picking up the phone. You shouldn't be nervous of going into these meetings. Clearly, as long as you're not trying to rip anyone off, as long as what you're providing is good value, as long as you're doing all the right stuff and you're not being unfortunately, the used car salesperson stereotype. If you're being the sales professional, the B2B complex sales professional, you should be confident going into these meetings because, and I think this is relevant for yourself, no one's jumping across the desk and attacking you. If you make a mistake, if you probably screw things up, the worst case scenarios, they're probably slightly rude to you. They usher you out the door before the meeting's ended. And clearly you're the best example of this, Tim, because no one's reaching across any tables and going anywhere near you, not from a long shot in any scenario, which is awesome. So bringing this back then, and to give the audience more context, have you always been overly prepared? Have you always been able to seemingly reframe conflict, reframe fear into excitement? Or is this something that you have learned and have been taught, whether it be the military, mentors, books, whatever it is? Is it something that you were born with, this ability, or is it something that you've learned over time?
I'm sure it has to be a little bit of both. If I look at my dad was a narcotics officer in California during the big drug war era. So I was intimately familiar, with an immediate family member having to deal with fear and having to deal with stress, stealing a plane of cocaine and flying it from Central America and the Caribbean and landing it and hiding it, like pretty incredible movie type stuff. Those are things that my dad did. That's growing up and being like, okay, well, son, can you answer that phone and just the red phone that's in the closet and tell them that, I'm out in the pool or something. So I was raised and being, familiar with dealing with fear, and then, being an athlete, having to walk onto the big stages and perform, and then walking into a special forces selection room and having 10 special forces guys look at you and see if you are worthy to wear that green beret, and then get into an ODA and say that, hey, you're going to deploy, you're going to go to Iraq, you're going to go to Afghanistan, South America, Europe, and being evaluated if I'm good enough to do that job. So knowing that those things are coming, it has definitely been this learned thing throughout my entire life, getting better and better and better. I'm not perfect. I'm never going to be perfect, and I'm still learning how to do it. But the one thing that I do every single time is I try to prepare.
So I don't want you to take this the wrong way, and this is coming from a good place, and this will be useful for the audience. So it seems like you're describing then of the athlete being evaluated, being tested. Are you were you brought up in that way, that not that you were seeking approval, but you wanted to win, that you wanted to be the best? Is that how you were brought up? Because clearly that translates into the results that you've had with everything else. Is that an upbringing thing, or do you think that's genetic? Do you think that's in your DNA?
I'm sure it's both. But my household was not a household that if you went to an event and you lost that event, you could bring a participation medal home. That's not how my home worked. You won or you lost, and there were rewards that were associated with winning, and there was disappointment that was associated with losing, which is right. I think we're in an era where everybody just wants to get a pat on the back regardless of what they do, and that's not how it works. Especially when we're trying to move product. If I'm trying to sell a company and I'm putting it in position for it to be acquired, I'm making sure I'm overly profitable. I'm moving tons of product. All of my expenses are low, so it's set for it to be sold, and it has to be executed perfectly. And if it's not, you lose. And if you lose, you don't make money. And if you don't make money, then what's the point of working? This is what you do. You're supposed to sell stuff. So do or don't. You're either a failure or you've succeeded. You're either a winner or you're a loser. So that's how it works. You don't get to participate.
Sorry to interrupt that, Tim. This is why I love sales, because there is no second place. You either win and you get the deal, or not worst case, second best scenario, you then hold on, you suck up to this, and you provide value, and you're there when the person who won screws up, which inevitably happens, and you take the business back off them that you lost in the first place. But that's why I love sales. That's why I'm passionate about it. I've played quite a lot of basketball as a kid, but over here in the UK, it's not difficult to be good at basketball. It's not the same as the US and elsewhere. But my competitive streak comes from winning in business, having the most downloaded sales podcast, having one of the biggest business podcasts, having this ability, that's not very humble, having the skill set to go out and drive new business and bring in revenue. And that's what gets me super excited. And so I like talking about this with the audience. And even so, from your perspective, you're on 15 levels higher than what I am, and probably what I'll get to with my goals and aspirations and the plan for my life. Where you have been so far is crazy high level. So from that, do you correlate happiness with winning? And where I'm going with this is there a point, if say we're earning 20 grand a month selling, we're earning 100 grand a month, doing $1 million a year selling, to twist this conversation on its head slightly, is happiness at 2 million in revenue a month? Is it at 3 million revenue a month? Does it ever end? Or, and I'm tying this back for all the UFC fans who are kind of listen to the show here. I'm tying this back into your recent retirement from the UFC. Is there a point where you feel like in business, in sport, you've achieved enough to tick that box, or does it never end?
I think it's about your motivation. And for me, my motivation has been twofold. One, to make sure that my family is provided for and secure without question. And two is to be able to build a platform that I can affect change from. There's a lot of things that I'm very passionate about. My country is one of them. I'm a very proud American, and I'm trying to make this country, which is struggling, a better place. And equally so, my family. I'm very proud to be part of my family, and I'm trying to make sure that my family is the best and most happy it can possibly be. Let's not split hairs. You can't do that without money. like my kids can go to private schools, and, I can get tutors, and I can make sure they have the best equipment to do research for school. And you can't do that without a level of, being affluent to a degree. I come from a blue collar family, a working class, a police officer father, like a single income parent. My mom stayed home, my dad worked. So none of us, my brothers and sisters, we were not wealthy. And so success for me is making sure that my family has everything that they need. And if that's selling this company or buying that company, it's just ensuring that they are protected and taken care of regardless, and then build a platform that I can make my world and my country a better place.
Is that the steps here? Because I see this from other guests I've had on the show as well, very similar. Of one, you've got to be somewhat selfish, get your personal finances sorted. Two, get your family, get all that, become financially dependent, whatever that means. It means different things to different people. And then the third stage, and I guess this goes with age, but you can accelerate it or have it stretched out as well, of then it's charity, then it's bigger picture, then it's having an impact. Are those the three stages you think for success in finance and business that we should be kind of not aiming towards, but have at the back of our minds as a structure that successful people have put in place?
Some of them happen in conjunction with each other and even in tandem, but I think it makes perfect sense where you really can't focus on one when you're worrying about another. I can't go and try to be a good entrepreneur. I can't even go and be philanthropic when I'm worrying about putting food on my family's table. That's not how it works. I realized Mother Teresa had nothing, and she gave everything that she had everywhere that she went. She also didn't have a 2-year-old and a couple of teenage daughters, and a beautiful wife that I need to make sure has everything that she needs. So, hats off to Mother Teresa. I am not her, like they have to be taken care of. And I will, until the day I die, try to make this world a better place.
So talking about motivation here, how much of motivation is down to discipline and habits, and how much of it is you wake up, you feel happy, you're motivated, and clearly your amount of willpower goes down throughout the day. You make better decisions in the morning than perhaps people do in the evening, that there's loads of science to back that up. But how much of it is down to discipline versus how we're feeling as we go throughout the day and how motivated we are in the moment?
I think how you're feeling is related to how disciplined you are. You will be very hard pressed to find a time, a moment, a second with me where I'm not energetic, when I am not intellectually participating in the thing that I'm doing. From the time that I wake up until the time that I fall into bed exhausted, I am 100% prepared to do whatever it is I'm doing at that moment. And I think that's discipline. I think it's being prepared. I think it's teaching your body. Our bodies and our minds are these brilliantly adaptive things, but you have to teach it. You have to train it to be that way. Whether you're going to run a marathon or you're going to go be a power lifter in the Olympics, we're still the same species, even though we look completely different. And the mind is no different. You could take somebody that you drop into a well and their arm is pinned, and they take out a Leatherman and they saw their own arm off so they don't starve to death and can survive, to Gandhi, who can go on starvation and drink water, a fast for forever until he affects change. Our minds are powerful things, but it has to be taught and has to be trained and has to be prepared to be able to do what you want it to do.
Okay, so there's two things here. I want to dive into how we can train our bodies, our minds, whether this is meditation, whether this is lifting heavy, whatever it is. We'll come on to that in a second, Tim. But you said something here that's really important. We've talked about on the show before, and that is being present in the moment and being energetic and being just a good dude or girl to be around. I think that is a true differentiator in the marketplace, in the sales world, in the business world at the moment, because there's so many meetings I go into. There's so many people that I speak with that are half paying attention, half on the phone. And as a salesperson in that profession, it's your job to get their attention, keep their attention, and give them a shit ton of value so that they want to be engaged. But just in general conversations, you go out for a meal and there's people sat there with wives, partners, boyfriends, husbands, whatever it is, kids, and no one's really present. They're not really there. And so I feel like it is a differentiator if you've got this skill to be with someone at them in the moment and to be able to converse with them. And I think people like Bill Clinton is well known for this, of making you feel like you're the only person in the room. There's plenty of business leaders. Richard Branson has been quoted on doing the same thing. So Tim, how do you go about, whether it's training yourself, whether it is consistently reminding yourself to be in the moment, whether it is kind of meditation or something like that, how do you get yourself to be present and to make the most of your time? It comes down to that as well, right?
Efficiency is a disciplined, trained, learned thing. When it comes to that human interaction, if I'm at a lunch meeting, the only time I'm going to pick up my phone ever, even if I'm getting calls or messages or emails, it is to look into something that I can then bring into this conversation. If we're talking, okay, what time's that appointment tomorrow, and none of us know, I might open my phone to look at the calendar. Otherwise, that phone is off, it's on silent, and it's in my pocket. Eye contact, as if you are in a Baptist church in the South with the pastor up front and you're in the front row. That's the level of interaction. I'm not saying you're saying, hey, hallelujah, pastor, but you are that in tuned and connected with every word that's coming out of everybody's mouth. And that's something that has to be practiced. You need to mentally be a participant in that moment. And if you're not, then you're just missing opportunity.
Okay, so real practically, because I don't want to gloss over this. I think this is worth sticking on for a second. Is this practically a habit change that we need to make, where we force ourselves not to pick up our phones? So I used to bite my nails, and I've stopped by every time I put my hand near my mouth. I force myself. This is pretty gross for everyone who's listening. I used to bite my nails since I was a kid. And then the way I've got over it recently, every time my hand goes near my mouth, I go, oh, that's disgusting. And I just think about all the bacteria. My hands are clean, but I think about all the bacteria that's on there. And clearly it's quite disgusting to be biting your nails. And I don't do it in public, but it's been a problem. And as soon as I refocused, as soon as the habit became, rather than me bite my nails and I didn't realize I was doing it, as soon as the habit became, as soon as they go anywhere near me, I go, oh, that's freaking disgusting. It stopped. So are we talking, to get practical for the audience here and myself, is it's very literally, phone rings, you ignore it. Phone rings, you ignore it, and then you answer it at the end of the meeting. So we're building this habit of the end of the meeting, we catch up, versus trying to multitask and try and go back and forth and try and people please everyone all the time.
All right. Multitasking is great. And you can prioritize where you're going to spend your time. If I'm going to be spending time with a person in person, I'm going to give it the respect that it's due. I'm going to give it the attention that it deserves, because I put it, if I'm having a lunch meeting, that person's important enough for my time, and that person's important enough for me to give them my full undivided attention. At my family dinner table at night, there's no devices. There's no teenage daughters. They don't get your phone. They don't get their phones. If I pull my phone out, my wife would probably throw a vase in. So it's rehearsed and practiced, because my family deserves that attention. I need to learn the details of what happened in their days. And maybe it's a little old fashioned, but there's a lot of success in every single level of my family, both immediate and extended. So maybe there's something to it.
I don't think it's old fashioned. As I said, I think it is a true differentiator, the person who can hold their attention and other people's attention. I think it's something that we should all work on. And I think as millennials get into C-suite, as millennials get into the decision-making buyer kind of roles that we're all trying to sell up to at the moment as millennials, I think it becomes even more of a differentiator when you can walk into a room and someone is giving you the attention that probably you deserve if you're making the effort of all of this. So Tim, I want to come back into your world here. You mentioned, and I think to use your language, training our bodies and training our minds. How do we go about this and I'll give you the context and the perspective of almost every salesperson that I know who is somewhat successful is slightly out of weight. They're on the road all the time, so they're not eating properly. Habits and discipline are probably relatively high on their priority list, but they don't look like they're looking after each other. And I'm no saint in this. I lift regularly. I run kind of half marathons and things like that, but I'm not in the best shape that I could possibly in either. So when you say train our bodies with regards to, in the context of discipline, of high performance, of hopefully one great habit can rub off on other habits further down the line, what do we need to be doing to make sure that we're kind of mentally and physically in shape to really crush it in sales and in business?
So everything about our bodies are connected. You can't, if you're not sleeping, you're going to have low energy. If you are not able to release a lot of dopamine and endorphins, you're going to be depressed. If you're eating crappy food, you're not going to have high energy, and you're not going to have the ability to have good sleep. If you don't exercise and you're not eating clean and you're not getting good sleep, see the slippery slope that we're on. If you functionally build a foundation, a healthy base, a chassis that you can build anything on top of, you can put a Ferrari on it. You can put a Honda if you want. You could put a Porsche, but you have to have a really solid foundation. And that's where every single car manufacturer starts. That's where every skyrise building starts. They start with a foundation, and we're no different. So I get good sleep every single night. If I'm for breakfast this morning, sitting here right here, I have egg whites, avocado, and some pico. I'm going to have a cup of coffee and an apple as my pre-workout. I'm going to go to the gym, work out, and then I'm going to start a very productive day, a healthy lunch. That was after I got wonderful 8 hours of sleep last night. And so I have a platform, this foundation, these pillars that I can put an unbelievable amount of stress and calls and appointments and interactions and business deals and shooting and extra, like everything, because I have a healthy platform. And good luck to anybody that tries to keep up with the amount of work that I do in a day, because I have such a massive platform. And if you don't have that foundation, then I don't understand. Well, I can understand, but it's just going to be a very finite duration of time. You can supplement. In college, obviously, I had friends that used a lot of drugs and alcohol to enable them to do things. They would drink so they could go to sleep, and then they would use Coke so they could go and take an exam. And I never did any of that. And their tenure and success was so short-lived. It was sad. It was almost like a flash in a fry pan. So I really believe that you have to have this foundation for you to be successful, that you have to have this foundation of health that you can build on top of.
And just to double down on this for a second, for the audience who are not skeptical, but are thinking, well, my meat sack just follows me around and is holding up my head, and that's the most important thing here. There's so much research coming out, and even just the next generation of antidepressants, for example, they act and work around your gut bacteria, because so many neurochemicals are created and released there that end up in your brain. Our bodies, and I don't want to dwell on this, but I think it's an important topic to just stop on for a second. Our bodies are literally creating all the chemicals that make the decisions that we deal with each day, that, as you said, if we get in the right amount of sleep, we can deal with stress better. So rather than trying to avoid stress, rather than trying to come up with hacks and tricks and ways to manipulate it and using framing and language and all this kind of stuff, a lot of the time, just a couple of hours extra sleep is probably all we need if we're stressing, if we're getting 6 hours sleep, if we're driving around, traveling, trying to close deals. So with that, Tim, I've got one final question, mate. It's something that I ask everyone that comes on the show. And I know you're not, quote unquote, a salesperson, but I'm sure you'll have some insights on this from your years of experience, both the octagon, the military, the business side of things as well. And that question is, if you could go back in time and speak to your younger self, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give him to help him become better at selling?
Believe in the process. Believe that, and through the refiner's fire, the chaff in the wind, the only way that something becomes durable, the way that something can become tough, is through painful process. The forging of a sword, the building of an armor, the building of a house. It's an ugly, violent thing. It's taking a nail and slamming it through wood and pouring concrete, or it's taking a piece of steel and heating up and pounding it, heating up and pounding it, heating up and pounding it until finally you have something worth having. And when I was young, I didn't have confidence that this process, the pain, was worth it. And now I know it is. And I think there were times that I avoided that, but now I never will be one to sidestep an opportunity to endure, to be out of my comfort zone so I can get a little bit better.
When you're dealing, Tim, with high-performing people in both business, the athletic side of things as well, and everywhere else, is what you just described a trend? Do you see the people who are at the top of the game? They've got the both mental and physical calluses. They've done the rounds. They've done the reps. And what I'm getting at with this is the people that break through who have found a magic bullet, or is that just bullshit? Does that not exist?
They have embraced the suck. They have embraced the process. You created Apple and you're fired by the company that you created, but then you came back and built it to be one of the largest technology companies on the planet. That's what Steve Jobs did. But he knew the process and he was familiar with it. And even through success and through failure, he still rose to the top. And you could look through every single top level athlete, every top level executive. You see that same failure bounce back to success. It's how many times you can get back up and then move faster after you've been knocked down.
And I'm not sure if you're religious, and so I'm not putting you on the spot with this for you specifically. But is this faith in a higher power? Is this faith in the process itself, as in you've had a mentor, they've done X, Y, Z, you then have faith that if you do X, Y, Z, you'll end up in the same place? Or is this just having like blind belief in yourself that you can, if someone else has done it, if Tim's done it, I'm a human, I'm perhaps had a similar upbringing, I can do the same as him. How do we frame this up? And I guess, does it matter how we frame it up as long as we believe in one of these systems?
Yeah, I don't think it matters. I believe that there's a God, but I don't go and try to close a business deal for him. I do it for my family. I do it for success and to build a platform that I can continue to affect change. So it's they're connected, but I think every person, that motivation should be different.
Love it. And I'll just give you my side that I don't believe there's a God. I don't believe in high powers or anything like that whatsoever. But I do believe, or even know, I don't know how agnostic I am about the process, but I do know that when other people have gone through the same, and especially when we're talking about selling, when we're talking about success in B2B sales specifically, if you find someone in your company that has done X, Y, Z for 5-10 years and has had huge success on the back of it, sales has always worked the same. It's always sell how your buyer wants to buy, give value up front, be open and honest, be reliable. It's all the stuff that we've been talking about this episode. And I've got this faith and this belief that if you find the right mentor, if you find the right person who's already done what you want to achieve, and you do the steps that they've done with the same vigor, perhaps it takes longer time, perhaps it takes shorter, different opportunities come up at different times, and you're not in control of a lot of this. You're only in control of what you can physically do day to day. But I've got this faith with no God and no higher power involved that you can achieve whatever you want to achieve as long as you've got the right instruction set, as long as you've got the right process. So just my thoughts on that, Tim, just to kind of balance it out with yours. And I appreciate that, mate. And with that, Tim, tell us where we can find out more about you. Tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing. You mentioned it, your kind of bigger picture work. And we'll link to it all in the show notes as well.
Yeah, you can find me at Tim Kennedy MMA on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Pretty high octane type stuff. And, I'm a believer of freedom and I'm a supporter of it. Obviously been in the military and been fighting for it. And I think those are the things I try to spend most of my time supporting. We have a military nonprofit, the Sheepdog Survival Fund. And we help military and law enforcement guys get training and equipment so they can do their jobs. It's a nonprofit, but it's all good stuff. I don't know. I got a lot more to do. Just getting started.
Tim, I'll link to all that and all the other stuff that you're humbly, I can see you smiling as I say this, but you're humbly not kind of pitching at the end of the show. I'll link to all of that in the show notes of this episode over at salesmanpodcast.com. But that, Tim, I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for taking perhaps a slightly different interview than what you would do usually with this being a sales and business show. I appreciate that, mate. And I want to thank you for joining us on the Salesman Podcast.
My pleasure. Thanks, Will.